I didn't expect to make it through addiction, so I didn't expect to ever have to face up to it. Addiction is a response to pain. That I would just about argue that every addict out there has had some kind of trauma in their life, and that's what they're doing. They're trying to, that's an answer to trauma, a temporary answer, or it's a Band-Aid for it. So I would encourage people to stop asking why the addiction and start looking for why the pain.
I 100% was an addict because of my trauma. I didn't know how to handle the pain or how to get it out. I escaped my reality, and I was able to forget about what had happened to me for a while.
My dad was a heroin addict. All the way up to the time I was 18 years old. I saw the damage it was doing, then that's when the resentment built up. That's like one of the biggest regrets I have now, is that I didn't show him any grace. I stayed blaming him for everything. And it wasn't until I lost him that I saw that he was just stuck in addiction.
I grew up in a bad house. There was some abuse. It was an abusive household. So yeah, there was a lot of trauma from the time I was, it started when I was about 7 and lasted until I was about 12 or 13. At 14, I ran away from home. At 17, my mom got tired of me being on the streets and just hearing the things that I was into. So we decided for me to go in the Army at 17, and that's when I got straightened out until probably 1991. And I went to the war, and I came home, and my wife had left me and took my son. So I just went on a crazy binge. I was 21, 22 years old, and pretty upset, so I used that as an excuse to start drinking heavily. And the drinking lasted probably 20 years, I guess. And I had cancer in 2010, and the VA had me pretty doped up on pain pills, and then decided just to cut me off one day. And I was so sick that I went to heroin at that point and used heroin up until my son died in 2018. He died of an overdose. And that's when I decided it's time to get clean, and been at it ever since.
I had a really terrible childhood. My father was an addict, and he was very abusive to me and my mother. And when I was 8, he let one of his friends rape me. I felt like I was just not worthy of anything. I wasn't good enough for anybody, because I felt that if my dad could beat me and not love me, why would anybody else, when my own flesh and blood couldn't be there the way they were supposed to be. And then when he let his friend do what he did, I felt like all I was good for is an object. And I grew up in my teenage years feeling the same way, that I was just an object for men, and I lived like that. I didn't know anything else, and then the drugs were able to numb that, and I was able to escape it. I was getting arrested for possession of syringes, possession of a legend drug, possession of paraphernalia. I was robbing people. At that point in my life, I had lost everything. I had lost my home, I had lost my kids, my family. Nobody would speak to me. I didn't have anything at all. I had nobody. I went to rehab for about 2 months. It didn't work for me that time, but that's when I realized that recovery is out there. That's when it finally started to click that is something that people can have. And that's when I started fighting for it.
Pretty sure that there was a point where I saw my dad totally in the grips of addiction, losing jobs and fighting with my family, that I thought to myself that if something exists to make a person not care about all that stuff that's going on around them that much, then that's probably something I'm going to end up doing. And when I turned 18, he actually changed his life, but by that time, I was already a full-blown addict. Once I heard about that new drug on the street called fentanyl, that was enough of a reason for me to reach out to old acquaintances and try to get some, which I did. For whatever reason, I had a weird reaction where I started screaming at the top of my lungs. So, of course, my dad came to see what was going on. At this time, my dad had 12 years sober, and when he tried to ask me what was going on, I was so out of it that I just ran past him and took off. And my mom was home. She had told me that my dad texted her and told her what he had found, and then she was like, "Wait, where is your dad?" For some reason, I knew what it was. I just ran to the bathroom and tried to open the door, and it was locked. So we kicked the door open, and there was my dad. He was in a coma for, I think, 4 or 5 days before he passed away. I just fell into a deep depression, a lot of guilt, and I went out a lot. Pretty much from that point till I came out here to Kokomo, and I can't tell you how many times I overdosed within that time, but it was a lot. I had a friend I went to rehab with in California, and he called me one day and he asked me a question that was, "Aren't you tired yet?" And at that moment, I remember looking in the mirror, and I happened to have blood dripping from my neck, because at that point, that was the only place that I could use because my veins were so messed up. And I just looked so, like, for lack of a better word, pathetic. And I just broke there, and I told him, like, I'll get a ticket and I'll be out there.
Sober living is important because it changes people's lives. It gives people a safe place to recover instead of being out on the streets. And it gives them the tools that they need, the program that they need to be able to learn how to cope with everything and to move on to the next step. They just make it a really stable and safe environment for someone to go to who's been through trauma and hell, and they don't have to experience that here. Coming into Elevate and not knowing anybody, I was very nervous. I was really uncomfortable, shut down. I wouldn't really talk to anybody for a little bit, and the girls really worked hard to get me out of my shell, and I started talking to them and hanging out with them and going to meetings and getting to know people. And it's transitioned now into where I run the house. I have the best friends in the world here who also work for recovery. I am active in the community. I help the girls with everything that they do. It's just been really a big change from coming to a town where I know nobody to knowing the best people I've ever met in my life.
Well, for me, it was important because it saved my life. I was out of control, and I got structure when I got there, and I got time away from the streets and the trenches to actually deal with my addiction and get on the right track. It's time away from the outside world, basically, and there's a lot of good resources available. If you try it on your own, you're going to get stuck in your head and you're going to relapse. You need to have people that you can go to in crisis times. There's a lot of crisis times when you're going through withdrawals or you're just going through a bad day. So it's important to surround yourself with the recovery community. I love helping other people. I've got ambitions to eventually probably work at the VA and work with veterans that are suffering from substance abuse issues. That's what helps keep me going. Just being there for the other guys. Because if you do good, you feel good. And if you feel good, you're going to do good.
I feel like the director spent a good amount of time building a culture of brotherhood in the house that really helps people that were in a situation like I was in. There was such supportive people around me that really probably saved my life. It probably made me the most comfortable than I've ever been detoxing, just because you could tell a lot of people cared. People were involved when they didn't have to be, and it made the difference for me.
I do feel worthy now. I don't question if I'm valuable or if I'm worthy to anybody anymore. I am worth all the things I ever want in the world. You know, I know that I'm good enough. My name is Ashley, and this is my restored life.
My name is Travis, and this is my restored life.
My name is Eli, and this is my restored life.